Hi, I'm Dr. Papya Bhattacharjee. In this problem, we have to give an example of a sequence that converges to 3 over 4. Now, what does that mean? That means we don't know what the sequence is. So we have to figure out the nth term of the sequence. But we know that the sequence will have to converge first, and it has to converge to 3/4. That means that the limit of the sequence, say the sequence is an, the limit has to be, first of all, it has to exist because it converges, and the limit is actually 3 over 4. And we have to find out what this an is. Okay. Now, there are more than one example to this particular problem. So let me give you at least an idea of how to look for examples for these type of problems, okay? So think about it. A sequence, right? It will converge, and it will converge to 3/4. So what kind of sequence can it be? Like, what will the terms be? Now, the first thing that should come in your mind, there is a sequence that always converges, and it always converges to the number that you want it to converge to. And what sequence is that? Well, it's a constant sequence. What does that mean? That means that all the terms are same. It's a constant that you choose. And since it's a constant sequence, therefore the limit of the sequence will be that particular constant, right? Now, our limit has to be 3 over 4. So what do you think our constant sequence should look like? What are the terms going to be? First term is 3/4. Second term is 3/4. Third term, 3/4, and so on, right? So, if you choose this example, that all your an's, they are all 3 over 4, then what is the limit of this sequence? So, limit of 3/4 as n approaches to infinity, since this is a constant, the limit is that constant itself. So, it satisfies this property, right? So, this is an example of a sequence that will converge to 3/4. It's probably the simplest one that you can think of. Now, here's the thing. What if you don't want a constant sequence? Or what if you're wondering, are there any other sequence that also converges to 3/4 that's not constant, right? So let me give you an idea how to construct a non-constant sequence that might also converge to 3/4. So not constant. Now, you should start thinking of the well-known sequences that you have seen or you know, and you know the limit too. Remember, whatever sequence you choose, you have to make sure it converges, so the limit exists. Now, think of this one sequence, which is very common, very well known, is the 1 over n. And we know the limit is, and the limit is always as n approaches to infinity. What is the limit? Think of the terms of the sequence, 1, 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, 1/5. So the numbers are decreasing, and where are they approaching to? Of course, they're approaching to 0, right? And you can also see right here, as n goes to infinity, the denominator is getting very big, so the whole thing is getting small. Now notice that this particular function, 1 over n, it doesn't have to be 1 over n. It can be any constant over n, and it will still approach to 0, right? So say this is some constant b over n, where b is a constant. And the limit is still 0. Now, why did I bring up this particular sequence? Because I know the limit is 0, right? And our limit has to be 3/4. So what if I add 3/4 to 0? Then my answer will be 3/4, right? So what will I add to this function? So my nth term should be, if I consider this particular function or particular sequence, and just say 1 over n, and you can choose b over n for any b if you want, and then I add 3/4 to it. What happens to the limit? So what is limit of 3/4 plus 1 over n? as n approaches to infinity. Notice we just said this part, the 1 over n, will approach to 0. So the limit will be 3/4 plus 0, which is 3/4. That's exactly what we want, right? The limit of our sequence should be 3/4. And so I just gave you another example that's not a constant sequence, and yet it converges to 3/4. And if you have noticed, I actually gave you hints how you can construct more examples from this one. Okay? So for this particular problem, there are two different examples, a constant sequence and not constant sequence, both of them converging to 3/4. Thank you.